And Mr. Griffin, I apologize that we do have timekeepers. We are going to try to stick with our timekeepers. Rules are rules, okay? So please adhere to the rules if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries. So, good afternoon, everybody. How are you? How are you? You're good? Come on, it's sunny out. It's not even raining today. So, I actually live in Jasper County, which is about 2 hours away from here, and it's a very nice scenic drive. I live on a dirt road, and it's in the middle of nowhere, which is exactly how I want it, because I like to hunt, I like to fish, I like to do a lot of those outdoor wildlife type things. A couple of reasons why I'm actually running is because, as you see, I feel that we lack some leadership in the district. I don't think I've been at an event with Jody the entire time, and so, you know, at the end of the day, we need folks that are showing up, listening, and hearing different concerns. A couple of things about me. I actually am the only military veteran running in the 10th Congressional District. I was an airborne ranger with the 75th Ranger Regiment, and I served at Fort Benning, Georgia at the headquarters and headquarters company. I'm also the only candidate in this race that owns a national business. I founded my business, it's a digital marketing business in Honolulu, Hawaii about a decade ago. And I've since grown that, and we now have clients all throughout the country. And then lastly, you know, I just want to make one commitment to every single one of you. I'm always going to listen, I'm always going to want to learn, and I'm always going to show up for the places, for the different events, even the hard ones, where, you know, there may be an R in front of my name, and there may be a discussion that's not easy for different Republicans and things like that to have. But again, I promise I will be there, I promise I will listen, and I promise that I'll do the best that I can as far as that goes to implement policies for everybody, because at the end of the day, we live in a district that's geographically blessed. It's huge. You know, it takes 3.5 hours to go from one side to the other side. But that being said, with that geographic size comes a lot of diversity, and that comes with a lot of challenges trying to meet those diverse needs of that wide group of folks. So as we dive into some of this stuff tonight, I hope to share some of my thoughts. Thanks so much, and I look forward to it.
Oh, all right. I'm Joe Hunt, running for Congress in the 10th Congressional District of Georgia. And I think the thing that stands out to me is about this district is not only, as Bradley mentioned, the diversity of it, but the tremendous amount of small towns that are a part of this. And I think that small town America is the backbone of who we are as citizens and Americans. And I grew up in a town very similar to that, just north of here, in Elberton, Georgia, which is not too far from here. But the thing that troubles me about small town America right now is the dire economic situations that occur. And it's really sad for me personally to go home these days and see the economic difficulties that my hometown community has suffered through. And I believe that the single most important thing that we can do as congressmen, congressional candidates, and folks who are just generally interested in how things go is the economic empowerment of every single one of those individuals. And I'm running in this race because I am passionate about the people who make up this district, how they live, and what their household economics are like. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank God for giving me the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Tabitha Johnson Green. I am a Christian, I am a wife, I am a registered nurse, I'm a business owner, and I'm also a candidate for District 10 U.S. House of Representatives. I know the needs of the citizens in this county and in this district. My lifestyle is representative of the struggles and the needs of residents of this district. As a nurse of 20 years, I am dedicated and determined and dependable to meeting the needs of all the residents of this 10th Congressional District. I know how to work well with others across a variety of backgrounds to form coalitions that can help benefit of us all in this community. So I am committed to caring for our community, our state, our world. Thank you.
And I'm Chalice Montgomery. I am, like my other three colleagues here, committed to serving the people of the 10th District. I think what we all have in common, despite our differences in policy, is that we are committed to being present for the people that we are endeavoring to serve. You know, as a teacher and a children's minister, I've spent my life listening, not lecturing, and I've seen the effects of bad public policy on the children and families that I've served. You know, growing up, I also saw the effects of good public policy. When my parents divorced, my mother needed food stamps for a short time, and I needed to have free lunch at school. I was a hungry kid, but I got fed and I could learn, and that matters. So it's time to restore common sense, compassion, and decency to Washington, D.C. And so that's why I'm running on Medicare for All. It's time to cover every citizen with health care from the top of the head to the tip of the toe, with mental health, vision, and dental care. It's just time. We have to restore the Voting Rights Act. Our voting rights are under attack in this state and across the country. We need civil rights that absolutely, unequivocally protect every single person within our borders. And frankly, as a woman, I'm sitting here, for pay equity. It's time for equal pay for equal work. It is a matter of social justice and critical importance. It's also time to fully fund our education system. My husband is a public school teacher, and he comes home every day with stories about what he wished he could do if he had the resources. And finally, it's time to take care of our environment. When Flint still doesn't have clean water, I begin to worry about what is about to happen in our district. So again, I am Chalice Montgomery, and on May 22nd, choose Chalice for your best chance to win in November. Thank you.
We can now start with our 12th district candidates, starting with Mr. Robert Ingram.
Yes, I'm Robert Ingham, running in the 12th Congressional District, and I will bring maturity to the district along with life experiences, having some world travel through government that would allow me to be able to expand on certain items. First of all, they address the situation where broadband is very essential to the more rural parts of not only the district, but also the country. Whereas the rural areas have been left out several times. The roads we're starting with a report from a military saying those people that were near the most traveled roads were more knowledgeable about the world. So all of a sudden Congress got on their money bags and been able to produce roads. Then there's the rural electrification in the 1930s. And now it's broadband, that the youngsters don't have to crowd around a drugstore or a grocery store that has broadband and be able to have the convenience of doing their homework. I am Robert Ingham. I need your support and vote. Consider me on Monday through May the 22nd.
We the people of these United States, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, to promote the general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of these United States. My name is Francis Johnson, and I am so honored to have a chance to take on Rick W. Allen to restore that concept in our government, beginning in the People's House, the United States House of Representatives. Make no mistake about it. The people, the 714,940 citizens of this district, the 12th Congressional District, are not represented in Congress. And that's simply because folks under the Gold Dome conspired to allow Rick Allen to pick his voters, rather than the voters pick Rick Allen. They sliced and diced this district more times than the meat off a Subway buffet. But I know something about gerrymandering, and I know something about community organizing, and I know something about these values, because it's these values enshrined in that preamble that gave me the chance to live the American dream. And what I'm running for is to extend that American dream to another generation of our children and their grandchildren, because make no mistake about it, they will have very difficult questions to ask us about what we all did while our democracy was being undermined, while the framework of a free people was being compromised, by those who stand on their party's platform and support a president who says I alone can fix this. That's against everything that's America. We did this. We created a government of, by, and for the people, and may we keep it. I'm asking for your support.
Well, my name is Trent Neesmith, and I'm running for the 12th Congressional seat also. I'm a husband, a father. I am Bullitt County, born and raised. I am a small business owner. I own a roofing company there on Main Street in Statesboro. Been fortunate enough to take that company all over the country with teams of upwards of 150 people at a time. I've been able to take that company and that team into cities like St. Louis, Cleveland, Phoenix, seeing how states and cities react to the federal government, how the state reacts to the city, seeing how this is on a business side and moving families into these areas. I've been fortunate enough to be out on this campaign trail for almost 9 months now. I've traveled to all 19 counties, not talking and pandering to donors, but actually dealing with constituents and what they need. I've been able to sit down and discuss things like big money in politics. And that seems to be, to me, the biggest issue that we all sitting up here and out there face. There's no way around that. We can sit up here and we can discuss 100 different platform pieces tonight, but if we don't realize what the priority is currently in this federal government, and that is the money that is being dumped into these campaigns, we are playing you pay for your seat and you pay for your legislation. That is what we're currently dealing with, and I think that needs to be the focus of the forum tonight. So I thank you all for being here. I thank the League of Women's Voters. You can find us at votetrent.com, and I hope I can earn your support this afternoon. Thank you.
9 months campaign, you didn't done nothing. I've been campaigning for 5 years. Good afternoon. I am very humble and honored to be with you this afternoon. My name is Eugene Yu. I'm running for 12th District U.S. Congress. Why am I running for Congress? I am a legal immigrant. I've been living in Augusta for 48 years. I wore the 3 different uniforms serving this community and country as a firefighter, serving U.S. Army, and deputy sheriff. And also, I ran the company for 20 years, employing more than 300 people, my fellow taxpayers. Now, I'm continuously searching for this because I want to demonstrate my constituents what representative means. I want to represent you, not represent myself. Most all their politicians, they talk, they're taking care of you, they're a bunch of lies. I want to listen to you. I want to listen to what you go through every day, and I want to deliver your voice to the Washington. That is what representatives should do. Regardless of Democrat and Republican, I am restoring the American dream. However, you know, May 22nd, vote for you, for you. Thank you very much. Vote for you, for you. You for you.
Thank you, candidates. The questions I will be asking will be directed at all of you. However, some of the questions from the audience may be directed at specific candidates. But please feel free to answer a question that is directed at another candidate. First question I'm going to ask is a hot topic of gun control. Millions of children, parents, and concerned Americans have been calling on Congress to enact legislation that ends the gun violence that is plaguing our nation. Some of the proposed solutions include closing the gun show loophole, increasing penalties for straw purchases of guns, banning assault weapons, placing limits on high ammunition magazines, and funding research to report on gun violence in America. Do you think there should be any new gun legislation to deal with what, quite frankly, feels like an epidemic of mass shootings? We will start with Mr. Bradley Griffin.
Thank you. So for me personally, shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed. When we take a look at some other folks in some other places across the world, like, I don't know, the UK for example, they actually just took over as the #1 city in the entire world for murder. They have some of the strictest gun laws in the entire world, and they're actually killing each other with knives. We actually can also see in other places where some of these different shootings that took place, whether it's at Parkland or whether it's at the YouTube facility or whether it's anything like the Vegas shooting, all of these different shootings actually could have been prevented, avoided, and or stopped if the laws that were currently on the books were actually followed. There were folks that didn't file the correct paperwork preventing folks from being able to buy firearms. Additionally, Obama's Promise Plan kept minors from being charged for significant crimes in order to not hurt their resume in order to get into college. And so for me personally, what I would actually look at, instead of implementing new laws, is I would like to see the laws that we already have existing to go ahead and be followed. For those people who don't follow those plans or don't file the appropriate paperwork when they should be, I want to see some accountability on some of those different actions. But at the end of the day, I think that we need to go ahead and practice what we have and make sure that we're doing everything we can with the laws that we currently have before we start stripping away the Second Amendment for people who are not breaking the law and for folks who are abiding by those different things.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Mr. Joe Hunt.
Thank you. That's a wildly broad topic for a 60-second response, but I'll try to get to a couple of the key points. First of all, the weapons that are currently available on the marketplace today are equal to what a civilian police force carries, and I think that citizenship should have the ability to own the weapons that a civilian police force has. However, it doesn't mean that a civilian who purchases any of those weapons should not be subject to any amount of very rigorous training in order to operate safely that weapon. And also, I do believe that background checks are absolutely necessary. I have to get a background check to coach my son's 10-year-old basketball team. Why would we not also then expect someone who is purchasing a weapon to go through the same amount of background check? But I do also believe 100% that the key phrase of the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so I think the citizens have the right, should have the right, to purchase firearms and whatever it is available to the civilian police force. They should have access to those exact same weapons. But also, I think that when it comes to firearms and firearm safety training and background checks are significantly important.
Thank you. 1 second. Well, I think we do have Mr. Winfield, who is a boss, so we're going to give him a second to get situated. If you will wait 1 second, please, Ms. Johnson. What I would like to do is allow the candidates to finish answering this question, and then Mr. Winfield will come back and allow you to have your opening statement. And again, I want to remind all of the candidates that you do have 2 minutes to respond. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. We need to implement a nationwide system, a nationwide database that's interconnected from state to state, so that no one person could go from state to state and purchase a weapon without the proper licensing and background checks. Now, if we had this nationwide database that was interconnected from state to state, the shooting incident at the Waffle House in Tennessee might not have occurred. If Tennessee had known that the shooter's license was revoked in Illinois via a nationwide database, then they would have issued a license for the shooter in Tennessee. So we do need to make sure that we implement measures for gun control and that all states are on one accord through a nationwide database that's interconnected.
Thank you.
Well, as a survivor family member of Moms Demand Action, the issue of gun violence has been prominent in my life for a number of years. I actually lost my cousin due to gun violence. He was shot and killed as he preached the early service one morning. And, Moms Demand Action, much like the League of Women Voters, is a nonpartisan group. And so they have come forward with some proposals that I support, including a bump stock ban, limiting high-capacity magazine sales, keeping guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, strengthening criminal background checks and the national background check system, and repealing the Dickey Amendment, which disallows the CDC from studying the problem of gun violence as a national health crisis, which it is. When we have about 116 opioid deaths a day, but about 96 gun deaths per day, we can't call the opioid crisis an epidemic and not say that we have a bullet epidemic. I would like to address my Republican colleagues who have referenced the phrase, shall not be infringed. There's another phrase that is equally important, and that is well-regulated militia. Now, my family members have defended our nation in the Revolutionary War. I treasure our Constitution and our rights, but I treasure our community. I treasure our children. And we all deserve to live in a society where we can feel safe, where we can go to school, to worship, be out in public, and not fear that we will be attacked going down the street. So it's time for some common sense solutions,
Yes.
and I'm the person to bring it to DC.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Winfield, if you don't mind, we'll come back and then we'll restate the question for you to do your opening statement as well as answer the question. So now we'll hear from Mr. Robert Ingham in the 12th District.
Right. I'm Robert Ingham, running as a Democrat. Gun control and the Second Amendment comes into play. And the big person that's in it is the NRA. And being exacted from the military, they did tell me about having a gun rack and being able to establish that. However, being a school teacher for 26 years in 3 different counties, I did think that the high schools and any other school would be an academic tower to be able to not be able to be inflicted upon by the real world and gunplay. You find out that in Nevada, there were somewhere around 500, Parkland, 17. And I mentioned the fact that when I was at the 4th County Commission District breakfast meeting, that they were using it. And absolutely the principal of Glen Hills High School, which is in Richmond County, agreed that the students are using it. That not necessarily are going to be controlled by outside violence interfering with their educational process in order to be able to become better citizens. I'm Robert Ingham. I need your support and vote starting Monday through May the 22nd.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you very much for the question, and to the League of Women Voters. I've had the pleasure of working with the League of Women Voters for a number of years as president of the Georgia NAACP, and we fought for state-based reform to our gun laws, and of course, it's an uphill battle in Georgia. And that's why we have to reclaim this seat from Rick W. Allen. He's not smart on this issue, he's not sensible on this issue, and he's not strong on this issue. He's not smart on this issue because 88% of America agrees with all of the reforms that you listed, plus the repeal of the Dickey Amendment from being held accountable for their dangerous products they put on the marketplace. In the same way that we held automobile manufacturers responsible for their dangerous products as well, and other manufacturers as well. This is something that we have got to get at. 88% of the country agrees with these very smart solutions. At the same time, we need a congressman who's sensible. And Rick Allen is not sensible on this issue. The fact of the matter is he continues to support war profiteers stirring more war across the globe for the support and benefit of those corporations alone. Think about this. We've been at war for nearly 18 years. That's a violent culture and a war generation that simple gun reform will not do in terms of eliminating violence within our communities. All our children have known is violence. Rick Allen is not smart on on gun reform. As a matter of fact, he's not sensible and he's not strong. When the president minces words with the NRA, Rick Allen should stand up and not take $9,700 from the NRA. If you send me to the platform to take on Rick Allen, I promise I won't take $1 from the NRA, and I will put our kids as first priority before any gun manufacturer.
Thank you. Mr. Neesmith?
Well, as the only candidate in the 12th District with the distinction of having the support of the Moms Against Violence, gun violence, I am in support of standardized permitting. I am a gun owner, and there are Republicans in this room more than likely that own weapons that also are carry concealed licensed. We have a system in place to help regulate the militia. We just need to take the carry concealed part of the permit off and have it as a standardized permitting for all gun owners. No one else up here is going to say that, but you have to have a valid ID. You have to go to the probate judge and fill out a lengthy application. You have to then take that application over to the sheriff's department to do your fingerprints. You do your fingerprints, you bring that back to the probate judge, and the probate judge has the power not only to do a background check, criminal, but he can also look into your medical records to see if you've been put into a mental health institution, if you've had drug abuse charges, if you've had violent crimes against a spouse. All these things can be seen in that process because it is a judge that is doing it. So I'm the only one saying a standardized permitting for all gun owners because I have a permit. And I challenge Democrats and Republicans, when you're talking to somebody that is saying, as some of these gentlemen said earlier, that they want to, not regulate the militia, we need to ask them, do you first and foremost, do you have a permit? And so let's move towards a standardized permitting. If you send me to DC, it's not that far-fetched of an idea. There's already systems in place. I'll take care of that when I get there.
Mr. Yu?
Please have a seat. Please sit down. Everybody else is sat. Please sit down.
Mr. Yu, I apologize. As a moderator, I have the opportunity to help enforce, and so just out of fairness and to keep everything fair, would you mind taking a seat? I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
I have started.
Okay.
Thank you. And that does not count against your time.
Well, Mr. Johnson, I counted, you mentioned the Rick Allen 11 times so far. Don't worry about the Rick Allen. You need to worry about me. My God, he's not even here. About your question. Thank you for your question. Anything I want to say, my fellow Republican, along with Trent Smith already said it. I believe 100% Second Amendment. The gun itself is not killing the people. Think about it. Planned Parenthood, they're killing over 600,000 year 2017. Last year, gun-related homicide, including suicide, is on 5,000. So, I want to ask my fellow Democrat and a progressive liberal, please, targeting those baby killing, those Planned Parenthood. You need to attack on the Planned Parenthood rather than talking about Second Amendment. And I am, like I told you before, I am veterans. Protecting, defending Constitution. End the story. Period. Thank you.
I want to claim the right to rebut since you mentioned my name. Mention my name.
I appreciate it. Hold on, Ms. Johnson. I appreciate it. Thank you. We will offer an opportunity. If you would please write down your notes, and we will be sure to get back to it. Again, the way we have this forum set up, it is not intended to be a debate. We want to make sure that each candidate has an opportunity to actually tell what your position is on each of these issues. And so we will have time in between questions to rebuttal. So I just ask if you would make your notes so you will know what issues you want to rebut, and we will have 30 seconds to a minute for that rebuttal. Thank you. At this time, I would like for Mr. Richard Winfield in the 10th District to give his opening statement, and if he wishes to respond to the question, which was your stance on any new gun control legislation.
I apologize for being late. Another campaign event kept me. I appreciate the invitation from the League of Women Voters. My mother was a longtime member. I remember meetings that I had been to as a spectator as a young boy. In any event, I'm running because I feel our nation has neglected to recognize and enforce. Thank you. Our nation has neglected to recognize and enforce the social rights we need to take care of our families and participate fairly in our democracy. These include our right to a job at a fair wage, our right to affordable housing, our right to health care, our right to education at all levels, our right to both civil and criminal legal representation, our right to have access to culture. Now, I am the first candidate for Congress who is advocating a federal job guarantee, which will wipe out unemployment and poverty wages. The ground is shifting under our feet, as you may have heard. Kirsten Gillibrand, Cory Booker, and now Bernie Sanders have jumped on the bandwagon of this game-changing measure. And it's crucial that we recognize the significance of this midterm election. We have a chance to show that we understand that unemployment and poverty are not inevitable facts of human existence. We have a political responsibility for their presence. We can put an end to them, and that is an ethical requirement that we must fulfill if our nation is to have any genuine greatness. And in doing so, we can set the stage for having a healthcare system with no copays, no deductibles that works. We can fix our educational system with national fair funding and improve the hiring, the numbers, the salaries, the training of teachers. We can provide and build an adequate supply of affordable housing. We can transform the conditions of our nation, and engender a new birth of freedom. I hope you will recognize the significance of this primary and act accordingly.
Thank you.
Now, in regard to the question of gun reform, I think we have to recognize that the very negligent proliferation of guns in our society with the resulting epidemic of gun deaths has become a threat to our public safety and our democracy. And if we're going to have the kind of unconstrained debate that we should be able to have in every public space, we have to, first of all, prohibit privately owned guns from all public spaces and keep them in homes, in our cars, on firing ranges, and on animal hunting grounds. We need to make gun manufacturing and ownership both safer and more responsible. We need to take away the complete absence of liability of gun manufacturers. We have to consider gun owners as being in a situation as like automobile owners, as owning a lethal factor, and we should have liability insurance for gun owners and purchasers of ammunition. We should ensure that research can be done on gun violence and how to make guns safer and less of a threat to our public safety. We should ensure that new guns have fingerprint IDs or codes that have to be entered. We have to ensure that weapons that are designed for mass slaughter are prohibited, such as semi-automatic rifles, silencers, armor-piercing bullets, and the like. And we need to ensure that there's a very privately held, or I should say confidential database, so that we can have gun and ammunition checks, so that no one with a history of mental illness, a history of domestic violence, a history of criminal activity or terrorist activity is allowed to possess firearms or ammunition. Then we can put an end to our gun violence epidemic.
Thank you. And this time, I would allow 30 seconds for rebuttal for anyone who wishes. I do want to remind you all, again, this is not a debate. We just want to make sure you get an opportunity so your voters can actually understand where you fall on those positions, those questions. Okay, Mr. Johnson, 30 seconds, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to respond. It's important to, when I hear people say the Second Amendment, to understand that the Second Amendment is for the keeping of a militia. And the right to bear arms in one's home does not extend beyond that. It extends to the car, it extends to the person, but not beyond that. It doesn't extend to a school or to a church or to a synagogue or a mosque or to a theater where we've seen violence wreak havoc upon our populace. It's a threat to our domestic tranquility. And a general blanket background or licensure is unconstitutional, has already been found to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And so Mr. Neesmith proposes that, but it simply violates the jurisprudence that we have right now. It would take an amendment to the Constitution to enact the reform that he suggests.
Thank you. Would any other candidate like to rebut? Yes, Ms. Montgomery.
The professor has referenced mental illness as part of the gun violence solution. And I find that particularly deleterious to the situation that we have with regards to mental health in this country. In fact, he has said no one with a history of mental illness should be able to own a weapon. I think that was the rest of the phrase. Mental illness is on the spectrum. There are some people who have anxiety or suffer from ADHD and things like that. You know, I think we are on a slippery slope when we start to blame mental illness when what it really is a lack of courage in public policy making, and it's time for someone like me to go to DC and make some real common sense decisions with regards to some bipartisan gun protections for our communities.
Can I reply?
Thank you. Yes, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, I think we have to recognize that mental illness does not lead people to attack other people at any higher rate than people who are not suffering from mental illness. But it does take a toll in self-inflicted killing. And more than half of the gun deaths are suicides. And there are plenty of mental illnesses that play a particular role in this. And the fact that our veterans are shooting themselves to death at a rate of 22 per day, many of whom are suffering from PTSD, is reflective of how mental illness is something that is causing a tremendous carnage of self-inflicted deaths. And we have a responsibility to put the brakes on that. And I think by preventing people with a history of mental illness from having access to weapons, we are doing them, their families, and our society a tremendous favor.
Thank you. And I can understand we all have strong feelings on both sides of this topic, but we would like to move on to another topic. Let's talk about the economy for a minute. Incumbent Rick Allen has said that to fully thrive, our small businesses need an environment with less federal overreach and less regulation to allow for growth and employment opportunities. What do you see as the major challenges facing small businesses in your district, and how will you work to increase job opportunities for your constituents? We will start with Mr. Joe Hunt.
Thank you. In the 10th Congressional District, one of the most significant issues related to small business is going to be a lack of opportunity and folks with disposable income. So it makes no sense to open a business where people don't have money to spend. I think on the far reaches of the district, both on the western end, which include Athens and parts of the Atlanta metro area, and down south of that where Milledgeville near Macon, and then on the far eastern end of that, which is Columbia County near Augusta, the climate is much, much different than those climates that are more central to the district. There's a lot of farmland, a lot of those farms are going under right now. So I think the fastest way to promote the opening of small businesses is to provide folks in those communities with excellent opportunities for employment, which starts with providing skilled labor training and certification, and that starts in middle school and through high school. It makes it an experiential learning process, provides those folks with an educational system that gives them transferable skills. It also creates a path to entrepreneurship, and once you have an entrepreneur, then you have a small business, and then we can worry about getting the government out of everybody's way who is a small business owner. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Green.
What I've seen as I've been going from county to county and speaking with citizens and learning the needs of the citizens, one of the outstanding things that I've seen is the lack of jobs and the lack of economic development in communities, and also the need for more job opportunities. We need to, as a nation, as a government, to work together to educate our younger generation so that they will stay in our communities once they go off to college, come back to the communities and put those resources and talents to work for our communities. And then that way, that will increase the economic growth of communities. And also we need to work with our local county governments to bring more jobs and bring more businesses to our area.
Thank you, Ms. Montgomery.
Right. Well, to address your small business question, access to startup capital for minority business owners is often at least 3 times more difficult to obtain, and with the loosening of banking regulations by our current Congress, that has become even more difficult. I am running on a full employment plan that includes a living wage, which is something that we hear over and over again. Let me tell you why that's important. Athens-Clarke County, for example, has only a 5.1% unemployment rate. It's a little higher than the national average, but not terrible on the whole. However, we have a poverty rate that is approaching 39%. 39%. And so what that is telling me is that we are not paying our workers enough. To that, any jobs plan that does not explicitly address women's pay equity would never get my vote in the halls of Congress. Further, healthcare is not just about your personal health, it's about your personal wealth. Across this district, I am hearing healthcare come up over and over again in a variety of different forums, including Putnam County High School. I had high school students concerned about healthcare. It is that much of a problem. So when we have hospitals in danger of closing, we have to realize that that is a huge economic impact on our communities. When the hospital closes, we lose those jobs. We lose the businesses that serve that hospital. And then no major employer wants to enter an area who has no access to healthcare. So it's time we shored up our healthcare system. It's time for pay equity for women. It's time for a living wage. And it's time to send me to DC.
Thank you. Mr. Winfield.
Well, the problems facing small as well as big industry in entering our districts are, first of all, a lack of adequate purchase power on the part of the population, due on the one hand to joblessness and widespread poverty incomes. Secondly, there's an absence of affordable housing that would allow new workers to find a place to live. There is an absence of proper infrastructure, including green energy infrastructure. There's an absence of public transportation that will allow people to get to and from work. There is an absence of proper healthcare facilities. There's an absence of cultural facilities in these towns. And that means that these are not particularly welcoming places for new populations to enter as business should want. The solution would involve a guaranteed job program that pays not just a living wage, which is a matter of nickel and diming people and allowing wages to continue to be a shrinking share of our national wealth, but fair wages that are tied to productivity gains. And if we can guarantee that our government will step in and put anyone who does not have a job, put them to work serving the community, renewing our infrastructure, building a green infrastructure, providing mass transportation, providing the facilities and human care services that are needed to allow people to go to work, then business, big and small, can flourish.
Thank you. Mr. Ingham.
Right. There's the American economic engine. It's mighty force in the both getting the Congress to pass their agenda and their economic situation. They finally found out that if they passed it earlier, they'll have more time to work with it. The students moving from the community to larger cities in order to have economic opportunity for jobs that pay a great deal more. I got an example here. Procter & Gamble plant out on Mike Paget Road turned into specialty vehicles, and a past principal from the Cross Creek High School, he started a program for a new discipline, allowing high school students to come into the plant and eventually be able to earn a 401k plan and be able to establish themselves with substantial income equivalent to an engineer. Now, being that they are teenagers, they do fall away from the side because they lack interest or did not want that particular discipline. But it's also in the smaller communities, being able to express such things that are similar to it, not only in the agricultural department where a lot of people can pick up farming, and beside that, half the labor in the farming communities are foreign, and they're very important people. Again, I'm Robert Ingham in the 12th Congressional District. Need your support and vote by May the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Again, it begins with those words, those opening words, we the people. Think about the ontological possibilities of what we're able to do if we put people first. And so the guaranteed federal job, the living wage, investment in our infrastructure, reimagining education, making sure we reinforce that economic ladder of mobility for which we all climbed from where we were to where we are. That's important. I grew up on, an example of this, I grew up on Postal Route 2 in rural Sylvania, Georgia. I should say near Sylvania because it wasn't in Sylvania. Some of you know something about being from near somewhere. I had someone tell me that private enterprise will take care of everything. It won't. The United States government developed postal roads throughout the entire United States so that every citizen, whether you lived in Sylvania or New York City, had access to first-class mail. And then from that public good, those roads, we were able to have couriers like Amazon and UPS and FedEx now develop industries based on the public good, which was those old postal roads. The government, we've been told by people who want to be reelected like Rick Allen and people who want to be elected like Eugene Yu, is an evil thing. Government is not an evil thing. Government is people working together to do for ourselves what we cannot do as well alone. And that means building better roads, better bridges and schools. It means putting every able-bodied person to work with more than just bare minimum living wage, but a kind of wage that produces the quality of life that we desire for all Americans. This election is not versus Republican, Democrat, left versus right. It's about whether we will go forward as a people or whether we will continue to put people in power who tell us what their priority is. Every man for themselves. Do on your own. Elect a Democrat and send me to Congress and I'll get to work on that
Thank you,
agenda.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Neesmith?
Ms. Vargas, could you please repeat that question?
Yes.
To make sure I understand.
Yes, again, I was referring to a statement that has been made by incumbent Rick Allen, specifically to fully thrive, our small businesses need an environment with less federal overreach and less regulation to allow for growth and employment opportunities. What do you see as the major challenges facing small businesses in your district, and how will you work to increase job opportunities for your constituents?
So we are talking specifically about small business, which I am an owner of a small business, and I can tell you, we can go back to the capital part of it. I think that we've got a system that is set up that makes the playing field unlevel, because we have corporations that are allowed these loopholes and tax loopholes. So we got taxes. That's one way we can start incentivizing small business. Then healthcare. It will collapse a small business. I can tell you right now, I'm struggling as a small business owner to provide my employees with health care. So we need a system that would take that off the table. And that's why I'm for Medicare for all. But then again, another thing, rural hospitals, things like that. If you're in a rural area and you don't have a hospital, you can't start a small business. You can't bring in employees. You can't bring in customers. There's so many things that actually touch a small business. Net neutrality. In rural broadband. Those things we have to make sure are available to everyone. This idea that I get treated the same way as a multi-billion-dollar company is just not factually correct. And if you look in depth into what Rick Allen is talking about by deregulating, it does not help me. It helps those folks trying to use loopholes and different things to build their business. We need to be laser focused on the medium and small businesses. So there's so many different things that actually touch that. I wrote down just a few. The hospitals, a livable wage, $15. We need to move towards that. That will provide more buying power to the broader part of the public. This trickle-down mentality will not help small business. That's just factually incorrect. So that's the things that I see as a small business owner that are the problem for me personally and could help me
Thank you.
hire more. Yeah.
Mr. Yu?
Thank you, Mr.
Your time is running, Mr. Yu.
He must be, thank you for you mentioning my name first time. About the economy, the job, federal job, living wages. Listen, I came to this country with a $29 in my pocket 48 years ago. Then I ran my small business over 20 years. If I can do it, why can't you do it? I didn't get no help. You gotta work hard. Fiscal responsibilities. We live in a great nation, great amount of opportunities. You cannot just depend on the federal government. Federal government is not your solution, it's your problem. Those are the federal government bureaucrats. They never ran the business and tell you how to run your business. That is the problem. Most of the congressmen, we have a lot of lawyers. They have too many lawyers.
Hold up now.
They come up with a, come on. Don't get interrupting my speech. Those lawyers come up with all kinds of rules and regulations. That's what caused the small business ever struggling. Also, I still got 30 seconds. Thank you. However, ladies and gentlemen, federal government is not your solution. Remember, federal government is your trouble. You have freedom. We have a freedom. If you want to do something, if you want to be somebody, if you want to be a successful businessman, you can do it. I did it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yu, and I will provide some time for rebuttal, but I want to ask an additional question. It's actually from one of our audience members. It's kind of tied in, so I wanted to ask at this moment, and some of you already touched on this. I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr. Griffin. You could please answer the first question.
Thanks so much. Y'all, government can't create wealth. They simply can't do it. The only way that they can actually get money for these programs is by taxing 50% of the other folks in the country to raise that amount of money to do that. They don't provide products, they don't provide services, and so relying on folks, I actually have to ask Mr. Neesmith, you were talking about how difficult it is as a small business owner and how we really need to do some different things. Forcing at the point of the government's gun to a business owner's priorities, making them pay $15 an hour, especially as a small business owner, that's ludicrous. Secondly, you're talking about how big businesses and small businesses are all lumped in together. Newsflash, healthcare actually is a cutoff at 50, and it goes smaller for the small businesses, and they actually do get different tax breaks and different incentives based on how big they are and based on how many employees they have. That being said, and moving on, we're missing the obvious question here, guys. I don't know about the 10th district, the 12th district, but in the 10th district and across the state of Georgia, 1 out of 7 folks works in the agricultural industry, whether that's farming or whether that's directly related to the agricultural process. And so we have a product that we were growing post-Revolutionary War. It was actually against the law not to, and we haven't been able to do that for the last 100 years. And I'm talking about industrial hemp. It can be used for pants, it can be used for shirts, it can be used for hats, it can be used for nets, it can be used for rope, it can be used for anything. Point being, we're importing over $10 billion worth of hemp from places like Germany, China, Canada, etc. We've got an 85% agrarian district where we can start to grow that $10 billion right here, and then we can grow an additional $5 to $7 billion in addition to that by taking that raw good and processing it upstream. In a value-added way, turning those stalks into fibers for those pants, turning those seeds into oils for clothes. At the end of the day, we're talking thousands of jobs, billions of dollars, and it's a win-win for everybody, whether you have an R next to your name or a D next to your name. And it's sitting right there for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. And I did not mean to overlook you. Again, I want to just remind you all this is not a debate. Please feel free to refer to any statements that you hear from your fellow colleagues, but please do not address each other directly, as I do not want to turn this into a debate. as I was stating earlier, is
I think Mr. Neesmith deserves an opportunity to
I can't-
respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, he did use newsflash on this.
well, hold on, Mr. Smith. What I was going to do was go ahead and
I
just
think we need
make
to
it part
rebuttal a newsflash.
of our question.
I'll play, but I do agree with you on him.
Hold on, Mr. Neesmith. That's associated with this question, so I want y'all to kind of tie that in. Some of you have already touched on this, but I want you to expound on it a little bit, and then if you have a rebuttal, we'll allow for 30 seconds for that. Again, one of your audience members want to know specifically what is the economic plan for each of your districts, and some of you have already touched on that, but they want to expound specifically of what are your plans to address the intense, persistent poverty. So not necessarily related to just small business, but poverty in general. And we'll start with Ms. Johnson-Green.
One way to address poverty in general is to educate our younger generation, educate them also, and educate the parents, and provide incentives for the parents and the kids to pursue higher education. One bill before Congress right now is to terminate the Department of Education, and we can't do that. That would be a travesty. Without the Department of Education, millions of Americans wouldn't be able to pursue higher education, including myself. So we need to make sure that we vote for candidates that will uphold the Department of Education and also provide encouragement for our generation and the younger generation to pursue education. If we had a more educated population, that would help to remedy some of the issues that plague and haunt our society, such as poverty and gun violence.
Thank you. Ms. Montgomery.
Yes, the problem of poverty is multifaceted, and it can be very complicated. I would like to tell you about a program that was in place in Athens. I like to call it the saddest binder I've ever seen, because it was the Athens Comprehensive Plan for Children. What this was an outreach out of the Obama administration. The program was called Promise Neighborhoods. And Athens had been picked as one of 20 pilot cities around the nation to study every aspect of poverty, from early childhood education to free lunch programs, to job training, to other economic opportunities, to affordable housing. At every single level, there was funding to study every aspect of poverty. And so that program was approved and funded in 2009. In 2010, the Tea Party Congress was elected, and in 2011, that funding was cut. Listen, the biggest anti-poverty measure we could enact is to vote in more good Democrats. And we need Democrats with the courage to get things done, to stand on principle, and the courage to be able to work across the aisle.
That's right.
It is time for that common sense and decency. It's time for people who can find a way for all of us to be able to pass the priorities that our communities so desperately need.
Thank you. Mr. Winfield.
Well, I'm afraid it's not enough to vote in Democrats, because we've seen what's happened when Democrats have been in power, and poverty has not been eradicated, nor has intergenerational, racial, and gender disadvantage. If we want to wipe out poverty, we first have to wipe out joblessness with a federal job guarantee, which will shut down the school-to-prison pipeline, put a brake on our mass incarceration and opioid epidemics. Then we have to have a fair minimum wage of $20 an hour, which will wipe out poverty wages. We then need to introduce free child care and elder care, as well as paid family leave, including 9-month paid parental leave when a newborn comes into the world, so that parents, and particularly women, can advance in their career without family duties holding them back. We need to have a $500 per child per month allowance to wipe out childhood poverty. We have to ensure that there is no homelessness by prohibiting evictions, foreclosures, and utility turnoffs, because if everyone has a fair income, and we also have to raise to the level of a fair minimum wage of $20 an hour, disability and retirement benefits, then we can reschedule payments and ensure that no one becomes homeless. And then, of course, we need to have a healthcare system with no co-pays and no deductibles, so no one will go bankrupt or be unable to use their insurance because they can't pay for the co-pays and deductibles. This is the beginnings of a recipe for eradicating poverty. It all lies within our current resources. We are the richest nation in human history. We simply lack the moral courage to take the necessary measures, but we can do it now. That is what this midterm election. It is a referendum on whether we can stand up to eliminate joblessness and poverty. And the choice is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Renfield. Mr. Ingham?
Right, those left behind provide programs similar to the 1930s, provide credits to employers for those who are shunned. Those include veterans, ex-cons, and those people that may have survived the drug exposure, being able to allow such programs, such as in the 1930s. My father's was one of those at a CCC camp, and I guess I'm not supposed to repeat it, but they gave him something to eat and he sent his money home. That was a fairly austere situation. However, he turned out pretty well after that. I do include those things about the American economic engine to provide those people that were left behind because they were not part of the system to be able to have at least a living standard for our mighty economic situation, being able to enjoy some of the things that are on the market now. So a little bit of more money will allow them to see a little bit further and be able to go the next step. I'm Robert Ingham. Looking forward to your support and your vote on May 22nd.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you very much for the question. It is a question that I've thought about over the last 20 years, and I think about each Sunday as I stand before our church and lead God's people. It is the work for which Dr. King was killed on April 4th, 1968, fighting the Poor People's Campaign. It is work that I have rejoined with my friend, Reverend William Barber from North Carolina, and others as we lift a new generation of folks who will breathe new life in the Poor People's Campaign. He was killed, Dr. King was, fighting for a living wage for sanitation workers. And if the minimum wage had been adjusted from 1968 to the day just to keep up with inflation like everything else is adjusted, your gas, your electric, all other things you consume, it would be over $18 an hour. And so when Mr. Winfield says that we can do all the things that he said, and I saw your eyes getting so big, how are we going to pay for that? We've already spent that. The $2.8 trillion, the 1.5 tax giveaway, the heist, where millionaires and billionaires backed their trucks up to the doors of the United States Treasury and got a bonus for nearly bankrupting our country 10 years ago, would have paid for everything that he just listed. It is a matter of determining what we want in this country, whether we want to be a plutocracy. And when I reference that Constitution, I'm reminded that it was men, white land-owning men who came from no place that elected them to Philadelphia, nailed themselves in a tavern and produced a Constitution. I understand that. And since then, we have fought to make that we, which didn't refer to me or you or many of us, including you, Mr. Eugene Yu. It didn't include you either. To fight to make sure that we included all of us in the bountiful blessings that are referenced in its document. And in order to do that, we have to decide whether we're going to put corporations and their profits, which are at an all-time high, by the way. It's time to chip in. Or put worker productivity, which is at an all-time high. We've squeezed as much from the American worker as we can. It's time to chip in. Or whether we will continue to put those interests before the people of the United States.
Thank you. Mr. Neesmith?
And I apologize. Could you read that question again? We've got so many varied answers. I just want to make sure I'm giving you concise.
It's okay. It's related to the first question, but more specifically, one of your potential constituents wants to know what is your economic development plan for your district, 12th district, and how you will address the intense, persistent poverty.
Yeah, well, as we see the gap growing between the top and the bottom, I mean, that should set the light off. We've got to do something. I mean, there's got to be something done. So that's why a $15 minimum wage would help alleviate that. That would push us in the right direction to closing that gap, or at least just stopping the trajectory that we're currently on. Why is it that we are so against the labor force that we don't even allow collective bargaining? We are hamstringing that at every turn, and we need to be actually focusing on that. And this gap is, and I don't see anything currently that is going to slow this gap and this divide down. So we need to be focused on that gap. That gap is what all this discussion can be ended with, because that's the problem. We've got a CEO that is taking every dime out of the company, and that is the problem. It's as simple as that. That's the country that we live in. So we need to realize that there aren't manufacturing jobs. I mean, we have fast food workers. There's such a huge population of fast food workers that can barely afford to live. I mean, that is just wrong. If you work 40 hours a week, you should be able to afford to live. Yes. The inflation rate, we have to do something. It's just like the gun control situation. Nothing is being done. So let's do something. They want to, I'm going to catch flack about the $15, and nobody that works for me makes less than that. I mean, I just, we can't rely on these big corporate folks that keep expanding that gap to be the ones policing themselves. That's just not going to happen. They're going to take advantage of somebody every chance they get.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Yu?
Oh my God. Oh my God. No wonder we're in trouble. That's minimum wages. $15. Why don't you ask for $150?
Why not?
Why not?
Well, let's put this please not interrupt.
If you're ready, pay for a $150 hamburger. Then yes, you can ask for $150 per hour, whatever the minimum wages. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow candidate, the business, small business, how are we going to grow the business? Let the business owner or business executive make their own decision, because there's their business. They know how much they can afford to pay each individual employee in order to survive their business, in order to make money, so they can grow their company, get bigger, so they can hire more people. That God given us, each and every person have a different talent. Talking about the fast food, I don't want you to be flipping burger entire your life. That is only a stepping stone. So don't try to come up with a working fast food line. We got to work on the education. We got to teaching our children how to not let them. We need to teaching their children how to think. Think. We got to reform the education so that individual child can grow whatever their talent to it. They can pursuing for their life. Remember first my statement, fiscal responsibility. You take care of your life, your hand. Don't depending on somebody taking care of your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yu. Mr. Griffin?
So we touched on this a little bit in the last question, but just by legalizing hemp, we're literally reclaiming billions of dollars and thousands of jobs and providing those different opportunities. Now, in addition to that, we have to take a few other control steps, and let's stick in the agricultural space for a moment. We have a lot of different businesses that can, right now, take advantage of different immigration visas for agricultural workers. But in order to be able to do that, they have to afford to be able to get those immigrant workers from their point of origin, pay for travel to get them to where they want them to be working. They have to provide different housing, and they have to provide a wage that is competitive across that industry or vertical. Now, that being said, the reason why a lot of these businesses don't take advantage of that is because, quite simply, we have a lot of illegal immigrants already in our communities that are already there paying their own bills, affording their own transportation and travel. And so it's just a whole lot easier to grab those folks up at $6 or $7 an hour rather than paying $15 an hour plus travel, plus housing, plus. So here's what I'm getting at. We have to enforce that these companies are following the procedural steps and using the correct visas for what they should be doing. We actually, again, we have a lot of laws on the books already for these different types of things. But one of the things that's killing us as far as poverty, as far as really hurting or deflating the amount of money that people are making on an hourly basis, is that we have a huge pool of illegal immigrant workers that are in our communities that are willing to go into these jobs, and these companies then are allowed to cut corners because they don't have any of the different e-verify systems in place. Listen, at the end of the day, we can lower housing by freeing up a tremendous surplus of houses by looking at our illegal immigration problem. We can free up a lot of jobs. We can raise the rate more officially because it's not going to be artificially lowered by all of those illegal workers in the place. So really, again, it's more about focusing on the laws on the books and enforcement and not creating sanctuary cities that really hurt those businesses and ultimately hurt American men and women who are hardworking and want those jobs in those places. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
As to the question of poverty, in many cases, and I would dare say in most cases, poverty is a cyclical environment where a series of decisions get repeated over and over and over through generations. And in many, and I would dare say in most cases, there is some institutional decisions and oppressions that were made that forced those decisions to be made over and over. But the single fastest way to eliminate poverty or eradicate poverty is to provide opportunity that is fair and equal to all in the form of skilled trades that are transferable across zip codes, across state lines, and provide an opportunity for those folks to stay at home and rebuild the communities that they're already in. There are two things that are going to happen if there's not opportunity in a community. One is they're going to leave and go to where the opportunity is, or there's going to be a repeat of some poverty lifestyle decisions that continue over and over and over and over, and most of that is due to a lack of opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Neesmith, your response also includes your rebuttal, the first question. Would you like 30 seconds?
We'll keep moving.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to take some time to rebut something that was said.
30 seconds, Mr.
Yes.
Johnson. Thank you.
Some of the hardest working people I knew were my grandparents who raised me on that farm. But it wasn't a lack of good choices. It was a system that kept them as poor as they were. They worked from sun up to sundown, can't see to can't see. Some of you know something about that. They couldn't get access to farm loans that other farmers could get access to. They didn't have the opportunity to go to college. They didn't have the opportunities that exist. And so I think you are onto something, but the option is not whether we're going to continue to pour money in the top of the funnel, the top 1%, but whether we will hear the cries of people and say, give us our government back. It's amazing that the people who are in charge of government right now always call it evil. If it's so evil, Mr. You should want to stay away from it. If it's so evil, Mr. Allen, you shouldn't want to join it. Send folks to Washington who believe in a government of, by, and for the people.
Thank you. Would any other candidate like 30 seconds to rebut?
I'd like to respond to what he just said.
Hold on, Mr.
Since he
Johnson.
mentioned my
Just
name.
hold on. She said hold on.
Hold on. I will come back around. Ms. Montgomery, and then Mr. Whitfield, and then Mr. Yu.
Thank you. I am actually one of the only candidates who has a positive path forward with regards to jobs, a legislative path. It is the Humphrey Hawkins Full Employment Act of 1978. It was passed, it expired in 2000, and was reintroduced 3 times. The problem with Humphrey Hawkins was that it was never fully implemented. It was never fully funded. And that is why I think that we can pass full employment. And we can target those funds to the communities who have long been forgotten, who have been ignored. And it is time that we focused our attention on the people who really need the help. Now, with regards to a jobs guarantee, I have a little bit of a concern because we have a president who likes
Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. I apologize. Now, last questions, I apologize. Okay, Mr. Winfield.
Yeah, I think we need to keep in mind that the Humphrey-Hawkins bill, in a sense, involves Orwellian doublespeak because it speaks about full employment like many modern economists do, as if full employment involved 4.5 unemployment. And It may well be that the market left to its own designs can never guarantee everyone a job, but our government can do that. It can step in and wipe out joblessness. And we have to give up these fairy tale notions that everyone can be an entrepreneur or that small business is the chief anchor and energizer of our economy. The very dynamics of competition in the market entail that firms must grow in order to survive, and it's no accident that more than 90% of breadwinners are not entrepreneurs, but employees like I.
Thank you, Mr. Winfield. Okay, Mr. Yu, 30 seconds.
The Bible say, do not give the fish, teach him how to catch the fish.
That's not in the Bible.
Let's please be mindful, not interrupt.
That's not in the Bible.
Please continue, Mr.
He's
Yu.
particular than a lawyer. If any politician or any candidate tell you he can have magic, he can fix their poverty, that's a lie. You cannot fix their poverty. And also, I heard somebody say, the 1%. Do you know, as American, we are the 1% of this world? We have this planet, we have over 200 nations. You're talking about the poverty. You haven't seen nothing poverty yet, as my fellow American. I'm from the Korea. It was so poor, you will never ever see that kind of poor. I'm talking about 50 years ago. So, again,
Thank you, Mr. Yu.
fiscal personal responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Yu.
Thank you.
And we all know that these are very passionate issues. I just want to remind our candidates, please be respectful of each other and don't interrupt. I know it's hard. Thank you. All right, our next question. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's start talking about the environment. According to the American Lung Association, nearly half of Americans can live in counties that have unhealthy levels of dirty air. Dirty air, exacerbated by the climate change caused by carbon pollution, is responsible for premature deaths, respiratory diseases, and a higher risk of asthma attacks. It is also disproportionately affects low-income communities, as well as children, seniors, and those who work or play outdoors. It can also lead to hundreds of missed work and low activity days. What is your stance on the proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan, and do you support government funding for the development of renewable energy such as solar, wind, and thermal? We're going to start with Ms. Montgomery.
Sure. So the repeal of the Clean Power Plan is one of the greatest anti-jobs measures we've seen lately. Right now in our district, we have a solar panel plant that's just kind of waiting to go in Oglethorpe County. They are lacking the infrastructure funds to allow that to happen. So part of my jobs plan, my complete jobs plan, is to invest in rural infrastructure to make sure that we can make way for those green jobs that we're going to need. As a matter of environmental justice, you've referenced the fact that our poorer citizens and our poorer nations around the world are disproportionately affected by our environmental choices. And it is time that we loved each other, took care of our neighbor in this country and in this world, and that we rejoined the Paris Climate Accord and went further, that we made the way for more green jobs and opportunity both for this district and the country, and that we took care of our clean air and clean water. In Flint right now, we still do not have clean water, and I am very concerned about the water quality in this district. I've heard issues out of Milledgeville especially that are very concerning. And so there again, we need to make sure that we are investing the funds now so that we don't have such an issue later. It's like your car. You want to take care of the $300 fix, not the $3,000 fix. And so that is why we absolutely must invest in our environment, in our economy, in education, in healthcare, and taking care of each other in this world.
Thank you. Mr. Winfield.
You need not only to keep in place the Clean Energy Act and the regulations that hold on fossil fuel industry, but I think we need to make them much tighter. We should not have any new energy exploration of fossil fuel sources. We should not allow any new fossil fuel power plants to go online unless they are replacing others so that there's no net increase in carbon emissions. We should instead take away the $20 billion of subsidies to the fossil fuel industry and divert them entirely to clean energy development. We should use the federal job guarantee where we put everyone who wants a job to work to build new green energy sources. And it can also do the kind of things that need to be done in the 10th district to supply proper water services, proper sewage systems, which are sorely lacking. So we need to really make the shift to not only putting a halt to the expansion of carbon emissions, but we need to begin reducing the production and consumption of carbon. And to do that, we really need to push ahead full steam with green energy.
Thank you. Mr. Ingham?
The environment, weather changes, poor health, green jobs. I have a little example here. Back in the 1970s, there's a couple older men, and noticed that I was under 30 and they were in their 70s, and they were calling each other boy, and I finally got to talk, and their water system was sour, and it should have been looked at, and they found out that there were some dead birds in it. So you allowed it to run for a little while, the water tasted a little bit better. But in the 12th district in Grovetown, when the new sewage system was put in, the economy started picking up there. It allowed, instead of trailer courts, new subdivisions coming out. And certainly it's one of the, they have the sixth, we call it, at the Fort Gordon having the gate 6, where they'll be able to enter and exit right at Grovetown. What we really need is the fact that identifying with the situation and being able to address what the Paris Accords were given, that we'd be able to establish a program, certain ideas, and being able to establish a better routine, letting know that not only the weather situation, but our health will depend on what the environment is producing for better health. I'm Robert Ingham. They need your vote and your support on May the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. Ingham. Mr. Johnson?
Can you repeat the question? Bob has got me tickled up here.
According to the American Lung Association, nearly half of Americans live in counties that have unhealthy levels of dirty air. Dirty air, exacerbated by the climate change caused by carbon pollution, is responsible for premature deaths, respiratory disease, and a higher risk of asthma attacks. It is also disproportionately affects low-income communities, as well as children, seniors, and those who work or play outdoors. It can also lead to hundreds of missed work days and low activity days. What is your stance on the proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan, and do you support government funding for the development of renewable energy such as solar, wind, and thermal?
Thank you so much. For a few years, I worked for the American Heart and Stroke Association as the Vice President for Cultural Health Initiatives. And we shared space in New York City with the American Asthma Association, as well as the National Lung Association. And it was great work as we were trying to produce the Affordable Care Act and work on each of our organizations' initiatives regarding the same. So health is the first wealth. Without it, the bountiful blessings of this country cannot be secured. In terms of the Clean Power Plan, I'm the only candidate who has made official comment against the law in support of the Clean Power Plan, official comment in support of that, and the only member of this dais who has spoken out against and been a part of litigation against Georgia Power, one of the chief violators of the Clean Power Plan as well. The coal ash ponds that you speak of in Milledgeville are also prevalent in the 12th Congressional District. We have a nuclear power plant being, 2 new reactors being built, and we still don't have a solution to the nuclear waste that we're storing right over the river at SRS. This whole area of the 12th Congressional District has double-digit cancer rates. It is Cancer Valley in Georgia because of this waste. And so I want to say this unequivocally. The Clean Power Plan must not be repealed. We have to return to evidence-based policy solutions that help to save this planet. We are trustees. We must give to our children what we received. And that's my goal and that's my effort.
Thank you. Mr. Neesmith?
Yeah, we absolutely have to keep the Clean Power Plan or support it, because we only have one planet. We can kill two birds with one stone, and that's with green infrastructure. I was able to visit a little small city in my district called Baxley. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Baxley, but the mayor there raved about his solar farm and the jobs that it produced, the energy that it is producing, and it is clearly the way forward. So we need to absolutely incentivize all renewables. We need to realize that, as bad as we hate the two new towers possibly being a nuclear waste situation, it is still an extremely low emissions-based power system that we need in the 12th district. It is going to be the gap between what we currently have as far as power and the renewables. So we need to realize that it's a necessary evil. The actual plant itself does not store across the river. It is stored on site, and it is a very small amount. We've also toured it twice now to wrap our heads around that whole situation, because there's a lot going on that will have a major effect on the 12th district for so many different reasons, producing jobs. So yes, we need to incentivize through government renewable energy. Absolutely, no doubt about it. That is the way forward. The technology is proving it. We have batteries that are now getting smaller and holding more energy. That's a crucial part of energy, is being able to store it when you do not have sunshine as far as solar goes. So all of this technology is moving us in that direction, and the government should absolutely incentivize it and also create jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yu?
Well, we are talking about several different energy sources: wind power, solar. Each and every different resource of energy, there is a positive and there is a negative point. Currently, we have a nuclear power, one of the safest, cheapest energy source we have. And yes, we love to have a living as a clean air, clean water. Here's my thought. If we stop sending all these billions and billions of dollars overseas, especially people don't even like us, if we can save that money can convert it to the different state, different local government, that water system, highway system. That affects some of the energy system can help. However, we as a politician, we are not the expert. We are not the scholar about all this technology, the planet. So we will very carefully study on each and every step. If we make it, have to be very carefully mixed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Yu, in your last 30 seconds, just to be clear, do you support, or what is your stance on the actual repeal of the Clean Power Plan?
I want to repeal it.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
So first and foremost, in my private life, I actually am huge on conservation. I really like to work in the outdoors. We actually, just a fun side story, we actually just bought 20 acres of wooded land, and I'm in the process right now of doing some timber stand improvement to make sure that I can get some low value trees like sweet gums out of there, and I'm replacing that with orchards like pears, as well as pomegranates, blackberries, raspberries, goji berries. Why I tell you this is because we all have a decision, right? We all have the ability to take those steps and to do what we can in order to provide an environment in which we want to pass to our children. Now, that being said, I think that there certainly is a lot of room to overstep bounds and to overregulate different industries, especially through the EPA and some of these other organizations. We don't have a lot of science, but the science that we do have certainly is competing. you've got a lot of folks on one side saying that the other side is wrong and vice versa. And so I support, repealing a lot of these different regulations, because after the 8 years when Obama left office, the EPA was so close to regulating a puddle in your driveway and calling it a water system, right? So again, we have to look at where we're going with the regulations, what the unintended consequences are, and who those regulations affect once those are implemented. Now, that being said, as far as a general whole, I think that we do need to do everything that we can for the environment, but again, on a grand scheme, when it's job killer and it's an overreach, and all of a sudden you have some of these other things happening, I'm not sure that it makes sense, especially when you look at other countries like India, China, etc., who are not participating in the same thing. They literally have billions more people than we do, and so they're super polluters, whereas, again, when you're comparing apples and apples, we're just not there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
Okay. So I've been to China, and let me tell you, if you've not been there, it's one of the most disgusting skies that you will ever see in your lifetime. And they say about Montana that it's the big sky state because you can see the sky forever and ever. I've never been. I've just heard that. But what an awesome experience that is. But in China, you can feel the oppression of their government and the oppression of their lack of standards for clean air and clean water, and it weighs on you like a real, actual weight that you carry on your shoulders, and it is disgusting. And the moment I stepped off the plane from China into Taiwan, who does have regulations on clean air and clean water, the weight was lifted, and it was a beautiful, grand July, beautiful sky. And I like beautiful skies, and I think that they're awesome. Clean power plan, yes. Renewable energy sources, yes. Fund absolutely the infrastructure to get those up and running, and think about all the billions of dollars you can generate from those jobs that are created and all of the billions of dollars that you can collect in taxes. Amen.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Green?
In order to have better health and cleaner air, we need to partner with other nations to reduce carbon emissions. And we need to find sensible solutions to make this world a better place. We need to find sensible solutions. And even if the president does not agree with the Paris deal, we as a state need to find ways that and take responsibility for our own state, our own environment. So we need to find ways that we can partner with other nations to make this environment cleaner and safer. So yes, I support government funding for wind and solar power.
Thank you. And Bo?
I just want to rebut the idea that there's a widespread scientific disagreement over whether human activity is altering our climate. Even if there were some disagreement, there is enough uncertainty about whether we are going to set into motion irreversible climate changes that could make our planet uninhabitable by intelligent life. So long as that risk is a possibility and cannot be absolutely precluded with certainty, we have an ethical responsibility to ensure that we begin reversing the carbon cataclysm that may be in the process of being unleashed. And we need to do it now.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Montgomery, 30 seconds.
I won't need it all. I just want to say there is no planet B.
Right.
That
I think we can all agree on that. Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. Okay. While states are responsible for drawing congressional districts every 10 years, Congress has the power under the Constitution's election clause to set rules governing how districts are drawn. It's used this power in the past, for example, to mandate the states use single-member districts. Current efforts to reform congressional redistricting are generally taking place at the state level. However, several members of Congress have proposed federal reforms. What specific measures on the federal level would you take to improve the redistricting process, and why? Let's switch it around. Let's start with Mr. Yu.
Thank you. My answer is going to be short and quick. I'm going to leave it up to the state to handle that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neesmith?
Yeah, so we are running this system where both sides are trying to manipulate these congressional lines, these lines that are drawn, these imaginary lines. Of course, we do need some oversight in this situation. So on a federal level, we absolutely need to have a reform on this current situation that we have with these gerrymandering and different things. So yes, I support a federal solution to that situation.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you for the question. I've spent a significant part of my career as a lawyer fighting against racial and partisan gerrymandering in the state. And through litigation, we've helped to reverse some of those damaging effects of racial and partisan gerrymandering. There are 6 cases pending before the Supreme Court, consolidated, and we will get some response from the Supreme Court about whether we know racial gerrymandering is illegal and against the Constitution, whether partisan gerrymandering is as well, and we will get that before the November election. If the Supreme Court says that partisan gerrymandering, hyper-partisan gerrymandering is illegal, especially if it's used as a subterfuge for racial gerrymandering, which is exactly what happened in the 12th Congressional District. They literally sliced and diced this district to exclude people of color. Then I think we'll have a whole different sea change. I'm hopeful that we will elect A. Stacey as governor of this state and give her the veto authority over the state's redistricting process. That's one great step we can make as Democrats. B, at the federal level, proposing a redistricting commission that would strip some of the politics, the partisan politics, out of redistricting is promising. We've seen some states where they do their redistricting by commission as opposed to the general assemblies of their states, and that's promising as well. But get this, here's what the issue is all about. And this principle that you talked about was established in Baker versus Carr. My good friend Emmett Bondurant litigated that case, and he's still with us and supports our campaign. Emmett Bondurant, in arguing that case, said this: in America, there's one great equalizer. Whether your name, and I'll add this, whether your name is Bill Gates or whether your last name ends with Walton, when we go into that voting booth, each person has one vote, and I will secure that right in Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Ingham?
Right. I worked for the Census Bureau 10 years in a row. The purpose, according to the Constitution, was in order to establish districts that would be more consistent as populations change and move. This political gerrymandering has been put on the TV from the Supreme Court for discussion. It's happened so many times, and often there's retribution by the other party when they get a chance to have such activity. To allow political gerrymandering for the sake of keeping a person in power, keeping a person or a candidate away from the base that he's already campaigned in, does not sound like our system. I'm Robert Ingham. I need your support. May 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. Ingham. Mr. Winfield?
We can't be a real democracy unless our districts are apportioned in a nonpartisan way, and there needs to be federal legislation to affect that. But we have to remember that there are several major voter suppressions going on that we need to think about. One is that there are nearly 6 million Americans who've been deprived of the right to vote because they've been imprisoned. Right? And as Francis Johnson told me, this is something that came into play only after the 13th Amendment. And we really need to ensure that no one who is a citizen ever has their right to vote taken away. And in addition, we have to think of the residents of the District of Columbia and the residents of all of our commonwealths. We need to give full statehood to the District of Columbia, and we need to give either statehood or independence to all of our commonwealths. Then we can really have a impartial redistricting that brings democracy to us all.
Thank you. Ms. Montgomery?
Sure. As part of a full restoration of the Voting Rights Act, we must ensure that our districts remain competitive. Without competitive districts, without doing away with gerrymandering, we cannot hope to have the kind of representative democracy that we were taught to expect as adults. You know, another very important matter at the heart of the gerrymandering issue is healthcare. We don't often think of it that way, but when we are sending representatives to DC who will not vote in our best interests, we don't just lose our ability to speak, we lose our ability to live. There are counties in this district without a doctor who have to travel to 45 minutes one way for health care. And so without a full restoration of the Voting Rights Act, without doing away with partisan gerrymandering, lives are at stake. And when I am in DC, I will absolutely protect an equal right to the vote.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Green?
Can you restate that question?
Yes. Lee, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second.
Mika moved on.
I did. I'm sorry. So that means that all of us have to follow the rules anyway. I think this is one of the questions from one of our candidates, and that's what I had put it aside to make sure we are here. Here we go. I want to make sure I read it specifically so I give everybody the fairness. I want to read it word for word. While states are responsible for drawing congressional districts every 10 years, Congress has the power under the Constitution's election clause to set rules for governing how districts are drawn. It's used this power in the past, for example, to mandate that states use single-member districts. Current efforts to reform congressional redistricting, have trouble with that word every time, are generally taking place at the state level. However, several members of Congress have proposed federal reforms. What specific measures on the federal level, if any, would you take to improve the redistricting process, and why?
Redistricting is an important process that is done about every 10 years after the census. We need to allow communities to ask questions before redistricting. We need to get more input from community members. Redistricting should not be done in order for one party to gain political power over another. Congress needs to send in federal monitors at the polls, especially in jurisdictions that have been known for practicing voter suppression. So I would say that we need to have more federal oversight.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
Thank you. So the concept of safe seats, which is at the root of political gerrymandering, is a dangerous concept. And I think that all seats always should be competitive in some form or fashion, either through primary challenges or certainly in a federal election, having candidates on both sides, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, whomever it be, that everyone have a choice. But when it comes specifically to the drawing of districts, technology exists today to be able to submit, draw a district based on the algorithmic properties. Now, what goes into all those properties, I will not claim to be an expert. But once you have an algorithmic district that has been drawn, that needs to be submitted to a board of human beings, which includes the human factor and the digital factor. And that board of human beings, which is appointed in a bipartisan fashion at the state level to make sure that those districts don't have some specific obstacle that needs to be overcome, whether it be a landmass or whatever geography may determine which folks go where. But then that needs to go to the federal government, just like Section 5 used to be for the Voting Rights Act. Go to a federal authority who says, yes, this is approved, and send it back to the states, and that's your voting district.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
I believe in reducing the size and scope of government. And I believe that by creating additional boards and bodies at a higher level actually just adds more bureaucracy and more things to fight over at the end of the day. So if you actually have a board at the local level, like Joe was just talking about, and then sending it to the federal level and then getting back again, the thing that I'm most worried about is, to be honest, I don't think it's going to happen. We were supposed to actually have a fiscal year budget for FY19 like 15 days ago to get started. And Congress is not going to pass one, they're not planning on passing one. And so my point being is the more responsibilities you allow them to assign themselves or usurp to themselves, the more they have to hang over folks. Listen, it's not a perfect system. And as far as the power or the safety of a seat is concerned, I've actually just recently committed to term limits. I'm not trying to do this for life. I'm going to try to fix some things and then get back home so that I can get on with what it is I'm doing. But at the end of the day, these decisions need to be made at the local and state levels, because it's the local and state levels who are in the trenches on a daily basis in those communities that best understand what needs to take place and how that needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. In rebuttal, first.
One point of rebuttal. When it comes to the Voting Rights Act, make no mistake, Ronald Reagan said the Voting Rights Act was the crown jewel in America's democracy. The right to vote is cumulative and preservative of all other rights. This is one area where I'm an expert. The one hearing we've had since Shelby versus Holder in the United States Congress was before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee. There were two experts that were called to testify, Cheryl Eiffel of the Legal Defense Fund and Francis Johnson, your candidate for the 12th Congressional District. Because the voting rights of this country go to the cornerstone of what it means to be a people who can choose the common good for themselves. And I want you to understand how it plays out. In Georgia, our presidential election, the most polarized election we have, was 53-47%. But we only control 35% as Democrats of the seats in Congress. In the General Assembly, it's even worse. Nearly a supermajority in the House as well as the Senate. That's what gerrymandering really does. It renders people not able to participate in the search for the common good, and that's un-American, and it's not democracy.
Thank you. Any other rebuttal? Okay, our next question is going to revolve around health care. The League of Women Voters of the United States believes that a basic level of quality health care at an affordable cost should be available to all U.S. residents. What specific reforms, if any, would you propose in health care policy to address the cost and access to health care? And more specifically, should the country move closer to a single-payer, government-managed health care or further away? Let's start with Mr. Neesmith. Loaded question.
That's pretty easy for me. I'm pro-Medicare for all. It's that time in our history. We have a small window as Democrats, because I got a feeling that we're going to have the votes in 2018 and then in 2020 to make this happen. We see senators, high-power senators moving in the direction. We see a ton of representatives moving in that direction. It is that time. Your mortality should not be based on a profit motive. It is as simple as that. Everyone, as an American, should want the person beside you to have health care. To me, it's that simple. We know it works. 25 other industrialized countries are doing it, and there's not a single party in any of those countries fighting to overturn their single-payer system. So this idea that it will not work is not a good argument. And so we need to move towards single-payer, and we have an opportunity to do that right now at this point in history. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Right. I appreciate Mr. Neesmith's statement about Medicare for all. I wish that he would just simply say single-payer system, because anybody who's been on Medicare knows that that's not a meaningful solution for all Americans. Right now, folks who are on Medicare, God bless you for reaching 65, you still have to take out a supplemental plan for your prescription drugs, Part D. And you have to take out another supplemental plan you pay out of your own pocket to cover the gaps in Medicare. So anybody who's on Medicare would say that's not a plan for everybody. And if you're on Medicaid, which I've also heard, if you've been on Medicaid, you know that's not a plan either. We need a real single-payer system that we can take market forces that Eugene, you should be supporting, and Rick Allen should be supporting, to drive down the cost of prescription drugs. There's no reason we pay 60% more than people in Canada or in Mexico. To drive down the cost of insurance premiums if we can get their corporate profits from in front of our people's health and well-being. Medicare for all is a slogan. Single-payer health system is the real plan, and it's time for serious policymakers to sit at the table and fix this problem once and for all.
Thank you. Mr. Ingram.
Right. Health care allows for longer longevity. It has many facets, and often there's lots of avenues where a person can obtain better health care through the medical people that attend to your particular needs. What happened is that you're being able to see a doctor, especially in your rural counties that are now very austere. They're shutting them down, or they're talking about closing them down and not able to establish in any particular or all particular counties to have health care, especially in your rural areas. The government, especially at the federal level, where money bills start, they should be able to have a program to economically help those counties that appear to be a little bit weak as far as having a regular hospital and medical people that will be available in their county. It's very important to the smaller communities to be able to establish additional personnel that are able to take care of the people in the community that they happen to live in.
Thank you. Mr. Winfield?
We should keep in mind that the United States spends twice as much as any other developed nation per person on health care. All the other developed nations have found a way to enforce the right to health care of everyone. Only 2 of them have actually chosen a single-payer system, Canada and Taiwan. But in our case, I think it does make sense to go for a single-payer system. I think Francis Johnson is correct not to have us talk about Medicare, because we need a single-payer system with no co-pays, no deductibles. Too many people on health care can't use it because of deductibles, on health insurance can't use it because of deductibles and co-pays they can't afford. We need a system that covers everyone with the same coverage, covering physical, mental, and dental care. Again, with no co-pays, no deductibles, no charges for pharmaceuticals. And what allows the single-payer system to drive down our costs so that we can save $1.7 trillion, halve our costs, is first of all, we can make use of the existing health provider system as it is, without having to engage in further investments. We can give people complete choice going to any doctor clinic they want. We have the most simplified insurance system by having a single insurance that everyone will be filing. Moreover, we will be in the strongest position to negotiate with healthcare providers and pharmaceutical companies to drive down prices to international levels. In this way, we can realize healthcare as a right. It is a fundamental right. We can't exercise our other rights unless we're healthy. In this way, we can save $1.7 trillion, which, by the way, is more than enough to bear the cost of a federal job guarantee that will wipe out unemployment.
Thank you. Ms. Montgomery?
Right. The professor and I do not agree on most of the basics of a healthcare plan. It is true that almost 40% of the costs at some doctors' offices are administrative. When you do away with the majority of the administrative costs, programs such as a single-payer coverage for all become a lot more feasible. But what I want to talk about is the issue with maternal mortality. In this country, we have the highest maternal mortality rate in the developed world, and that is higher for black women than for white women. We have a rural healthcare system in crisis, and it is a matter of equal justice that we attend to healthcare now. I don't understand why we cannot take better care of each other in this country. And it's not just a matter of should and finger wagging and of morality, it's also a matter of economic independence. Look, I love full employment plans, but you can't work if you're dead. You have absolutely got to make sure that as part of a productive society, we have a healthcare plan that works, that attends to women's needs, that makes issues with affordability and access a thing of the past, and that makes it so that we can all afford our prescriptions. I spoke to someone the other day who was paying $1,800 a month for her medical care and her prescriptions. $650 for one medicine. It is time that that changed, that we invested not only in the health of our communities as far as the physical health, but the economic health, and made our health care accessible to everyone.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Green?
As a nurse of 20 years, I know people that have to choose between paying a light bill, buying groceries, or paying for outrageously priced prescription medications. And that's a travesty. We all deserve quality access to quality health care. Rural hospitals are closing at an alarming rate. We should look to other models of other countries for models of and use universal health care where everybody can be insured. And we need to also look at remedies such as the use of telemedicine. We need to enforce those or look at allocating more monies to those types of services for our rural communities that may not have access to a local hospital or a local emergency room. So we need to look at other alternatives such as universal health care as a means to provide coverage for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt.
Excuse me. Access to health care, yes, definitely. How do we make that happen, right? There's a cost-based solution and then there's a market-based solution. And man, I've put a lot of thought into this. My experience in the business world saw firsthand how the cost of applying the healthcare bill that came down was devastating to bottom line profits. And in the restaurant business, profit margins are very thin, very, very thin. And how devastating those regulations were on an individual basis. And actually what happened was it prompted employers who then had a rewrite of what full-time was from 40 hours down to 30 hours to cut hours back to 28 and force other people into a second job. And so it was reactionary and very difficult to manage what is the right thing to do. And I hate complaining about something and not offering a solution. And I do not know what the cost-based solution is, but I can tell you as current, and I know my friends around the table are saying, well, it's single payer, idiot, we've just been talking about that. I'm not sure I'm bought into that, because the more things the government owns, the less free I feel. That may not be the actual truth thing, but that's how I feel as an individual, and that's how a lot of voters feel that I know. But the market-based solution is eliminating the restrictions that apply to trading health insurance across state lines and allowing for the pooling of individuals to put their resources together so that they can now purchase individual plans, which today, under the legislation that was passed and the stripping down of the legislation that has occurred, you are hard-pressed to find anyone who will provide you with a single pay or a single provider individual insurance.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin.
When we say that healthcare needs an overhaul, first and foremost, I find it ironic, a little bit ironic, so bear with me, folks, that the ACA was actually a Democrat-implemented agenda, and literally a few years later, there's so many problems with that actual bill that they want to push it into the extreme area. I feel we need to go the opposite way, and let me give you one specific example. There's a lot of folks up here saying they don't have specific examples. Let me tell you exactly how you lower the prescription drug costs. Because to be honest with you, I had a parachute accident when I was a Ranger in the Army. I'm now on blood thinners for the rest of my life because I destroyed my vascular system, and I pay $500 a month for a 30-day supply of pills out of pocket to stay alive. So I am that guy, right? So I've thought about this for hours. First, we need to allow Medicare to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies about the drug price that they will actually pay. Right now, pharmaceutical companies are allowed to set the price, and that is what it is. Second, we need to reduce patent links. Right now, those companies have 20-year patents on their pharmaceutical drugs that they create. We need to knock that down to 15. Reason being is because when you get at least 2 generic drugs in the marketplace, name brand drugs drop by 55% in cost. Third, we need to clear the FDA backlog. Right now, there's a ton of different companies that want to put out generic drugs that we can all enjoy and that we can save money and that we can put money back in our pocket. But we can't do that because right now, there are so many companies that are backlogged and the FDA is so understaffed that we can't get them through that process to be able to verify that those drugs are safe. And so, again, at the end of the day, there are real things that we can do without overhauling an entire system. Lowering prescription drug costs seems to be very effective for folks around the country and literally would put $500 to $1,000 back in your pocket every single month. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yu?
Those pharmaceutical companies, when they develop one pill, whatever their medicine, they study year after year after year, the testing, what reaction is going to be. So much carefully, each and every step they make. But here we are, we making Medicare, Affordable Medical Act. Boom, pushing them, make the things happen. Guess what? There's a lot of the things happen which we were not aware of. Most all this developed country around the world, the national medical system is failed. Every country around the world, they kick the can down the road because they don't want to really face to the people. They looking for vote. So this politician get out of this and let the people handle it, let the market handle it. Just like what Joe said, that the pharmaceutical company set the rule and the price, you just don't have no choice, you have to pay for it. My God, so we need this Affordable Act, Medical Act, need to be reformed. Yes, and I will carefully study. Oh, by the way, there is some good portion of it, but we need to reform that, repeal or reform that Obamacare, affordable care.
Thank you. Any rebuttal, 30 seconds?
Yes.
We'll go around and start with Mr.
Just one quick, to Francis's part, the Medicare for All is still one of the most popular programs that the government provides. I just want to point that out. And the new and improved Medicare for All does address a wide variety of different things. So, yeah, that's all I've got on that.
Thank you. 30 seconds.
Yes. Eugene Yu and Rick Allen have lied along with their party for 6 years that they had a better plan. They lied in the presidential election that they had a better plan. They said if you put us in power, give us the White House, both chambers of Congress, will show you what a better plan looked like. And this is the fundamental difference in this election. Their plan is every man for themselves. If you want the power of the people to be able to bargain against state lines, there's no bigger state, bigger territory than the whole United States. And to be able to bargain down those drug costs, we can do that together if we had a single payer system. We can get this right. Dr. King said of all the injustices, the most cruel and inhumane are injustices around health care.
Thank you. Mr. Winfield?
Yes, I just wanted to rebut some of the things that Candidate Hunt had said regarding the relation to business of a single payer system. First of all, the single payer system in no way reduces the private sector in the healthcare provider and pharmaceutical industry. It only removes the private health insurance industry with regard to providing insurance for necessary care, physical, mental, and dental. But what it also does, it lifts off the backs of businesses big and small the cost of paying into healthcare plans. And this is one of the big things that made many of our major industries, our auto industry in particular, uncompetitive with many European manufacturers who did not have to pay anything for health insurance for their employees. So in this way, we're doing something that will be not only beneficial to all of us, but also beneficial to business.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Montgomery?
Yes, indeed. I would just like to say that the Reverend Jody Heiss voted to repeal the ACA on the National Day of Prayer. And the ACA is not just a bill. It is about people's lives. When you are repealing a bill, you're not just doing that. You are actively talking about saving lives or destroying them. And so I want you to remember when you go into the voting booth on May 22nd that there is someone up here fighting like a mother for Georgia's children who will refuse. That's a campaign slogan, y'all.
I like it.
But let me just say this.
Tell us who that person is. The Reverend Francis Johnson.
Thank you. The former children's minister, Chalice Montgomery, as well. But I am tired, as is Francis Johnson, of the worst of these passing legislation on the backs of the least of these.
That's right.
All right. Thank you.
He
30
mentioned
seconds.
my name, so I gotta.
Yes, sir. You hit 30 seconds, proceed.
Mr. Nesmith, he's lying. He's lying.
Did I introduce you?
No, Francis.
No, I didn't.
No.
Thank you. Thank you.
Francis Johnson. Francis. Sorry.
I'm not a liar.
You need to take some time and study that.
That's the importance of not addressing each other properly. Was that your regard, Mr.
Francis Johnson. He's lying.
Oh, thank you. Well, candidates, we have more questions, and again, we could go on and on all day, but I do want to leave time, some minutes for our artists to actually speak with you all one-on-one, and so y'all can address more questions. There's several other topics that we can get on regarding education,